Hey Management 3401, welcome to your Thursday class. And I hope you all are being safe. I'm sure we've all been watching the news and the Weather Channel, so let's just continue to be safe. So today's class will be starting on Chapter 8, first part of Chapter 8, which is about organizational control. I have my notes here and I just wanted us to quickly go through the PowerPoint I made for you. So what does organizational control really mean? So that's just essentially looking at whether we are on track to reach our goals. We're wondering if we are working as efficiently and effectively as possible to reach the original goals that we set. In order to assess whether we are on track to reach our goals, we rely on control systems. And so these control systems are just methods by which we collect data, letting us know, yes, we are on track to reach our goals, or no, we're falling short of our goals. And so this is the data that we would collect at different intervals just to see where we stand. So there are three types of control that we would utilize at different stages in our data collection. And so the first one would be feed forward control, which we would put at the very beginning stage. So the stage where we're receiving our inputs for the product or service that we're creating. And so this is where we are implementing controls that would detect problems before they can even happen. And then the second control would be the concurrent control. And so this is what we would implement at the intermediate stage. And this is some sort of system that would allow us to detect a problem while it's happening. So the third one we would implement would be the feedback control, and that's what we would implement at the end of our process, the output stage. And so this is assessing problems after they already arose. So in organizational control, aka goal assessment, we can call it, there's a very straightforward process, probably a process that you unintentionally use in your own life, or maybe intentionally. First, you establish your goals or your targets, and then you measure what actually happens. So that's the data collection part. And then you compare what your data is telling you to what you had originally planned. So if your goal was to increase sales by 10% this year and your data is showing you that sales increased by 12%, that would be the sort of comparison. And then once you see how you're doing versus how you expected to be doing, then you think about what you can change or whether you need to change anything. So when we're thinking about the things that we want to control or assess within our companies to make sure that we're on track towards our goals, we're thinking about output, so our performance, how our product or service is doing. We're thinking about behavior, so the behavior of the people within the firm, the employees, the managers, and then also our organizational culture. So that just means that we are assessing and collecting data on each of these three categories within our company because we want to know that we're on track towards being the ideal that we set out to be. And so we'll talk about behavior control and organizational culture control next time, but today we'll focus on output control. And so again, output control is concerned with how we're performing, how is our product and service performing. And so here there are certain mechanisms that we put in place in order to commonly assess where we stand. So there are a number of mechanisms we can put in place to collect this data and engage in a self-assessment. But your book highlights 3 common mechanisms that we would use for output control. And that includes financial measures, our organizational goals that we've had to set in the first place for the organization. So like our sales goals, and then our budgets. So when we're thinking about the financial measures we would use to assess our output control, a lot of those ratios that we used and learned in finance class would be helpful here. So one, for instance, would be return on investments. So a second output control mechanism we would use would be our organizational goals, which of course are going to be specific and difficult yet feasible. And then another output control mechanism would be our operating budget. So this lets people know, similar to our goals, similar to our ratios, hey, here's the expectation. And so we need to stay within this range. We need to spend no more than this amount, so that we can make sure that we are working towards our overall goals. So even though we are being really responsible and we're using these financial ratios and these goals and these budgets to make sure that we are taking care of our output control, we need to make sure that we are not pushing people so hard that people feel relegated to engage in dishonorable behavior in order to reach these very high goals. So in your PowerPoint, I include a picture of a media article about Wells Fargo and how Wells Fargo set these really lofty goals for their for the people who work in their banks, the bank tellers, and in order to reach those goals, a lot of the bankers ended up relying on fraud, opening up fake accounts, just in order to stay in alignment with the organizational goals. And so, yes, meeting the organizational goals is important, but never to the point where we want to do the wrong things to achieve them. So for your next steps for this class, I'm going to ask you to be an entrepreneur, and you're going to open up a certain type of business. And of course, now you have to think about how you're going to control for what's going on in your company. How are you going to assess how well you are working towards your goals? And so remember that we learned 3 common control systems, which was feed forward, concurrent, and feedback. And so I want you to tell me how you would implement those 3 systems into your new business. Okay, so that's it for today's class, and I will see you next week.